This audio presentation of the Essenes by Josephus and his Contemporaries, translated from the ancient Latin and Greek by Edmond, Bordeaux, Szekely, is brought to you by audioenlightenment.com. Copyright 2014, all rights reserved. Preface. Among all the beautiful teachings known to man, none has had a more profound influence for good than that of the Essenes, and none has been so little understood. Historically, the communities and brotherhoods of the Essenes belong to the last 2 or 3 centuries BC and the first century of our era. Their teaching and their way of life were recorded by contemporary writers, including Flavius Josephus, the Roman historian and statesman, Philo, the Alexandrian philosopher, and Pliny the Elder, the great naturalist. By way of introduction to the values of the ancient Essenes, the following pages present the testimony of Josephus concerning them, as well as a summary of the accounts of Philo, Pliny, and other authors of antiquity. The Essene brotherhoods of the first century of our era are particularly notable for the simplicity and harmony of their lives. Moreover, they gave to mankind 3 of its greatest figures: John the Baptist, Jesus, and John the beloved disciple. The sublime teaching of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount is only fully comprehensible in the light of the Essene teaching of the sevenfold peace. In a wider sense, the Essenes do not belong to any one region or period of time, for their teachings are universal in their application and ageless in their wisdom. Traces of the Essene traditions appear in almost every country and religion of antiquity. In Sumerian archaeological excavation, tiles and stones have been found which show fragments of the teaching recorded some 8,000 years ago, and these fragments in turn appear to stem from an even earlier period. The same fundamental principles are discoverable in the Zen Avesta of Zarathustra, in the teachings of Buddha, in the Tibetan Wheel of Life, and in the Law of Moses, whom the Essenes claimed as their founder. The Essene traditions were known in ancient Egypt and among the Greek Pythagoreans. Echoes of the Essene teachings persist at the present day, in the rituals of the Masons, in the 7-branch candlestick, in the ancient greeting, "Peace be with you." However, their importance to us lies in the fact that they show modern man the way out of his dilemma. The truth they teach are as applicable today as 2,000 or 8,000 years ago, for the laws of life and the universe are unchanged. The Essene teachings show how man's deviation from the law are the cause of all our troubles, and they give the method by which we can solve both our individual problems and the problems of the modern world. Edmond, Bordeaux, Szekely. The Essenes by Josephus and the Contemporaries. The Life and Works of Josephus. Even considering authors from many cultures and religions, none give more authentic and minute information on the Essenes than the celebrated Roman Jewish historian, Flavius Josephus, in his Antiquities of the Jews and the Jewish War. Flavius Josephus was born in 37 A.D. at Jerusalem. He was of both royal and sacerdotal lineage, being descended on his mother's side from the line of Asmonean princes, while his father, Matthias, officiated as a priest in the first of the 24 courses. The careful education he received developed his brilliant faculties at an unusually early age, and his acquirements both in Hebrew and Greek literature, the 2 principal branches of his studies, soon drew the attention of the public to him. Having successfully attended the lectures at the paramount religious schools of his time, or sects, as he inaccurately terms them, he withdrew into the desert to a man whom he calls Banus, an Essene and a follower of John the Baptist. 3 years later he returned to Jerusalem. So great was the regard for his abilities, at the age of only 26 he was chosen delegate to Nero. When the Jews rose in their last and fatal insurrection against the Romans, Josephus was appointed governor of Galilee. Here he displayed the greatest valor and prudence, but the advance of the Roman general Vespasian, 67 A.D., made resistance hopeless. The city of Jotapata, in which Josephus had thrown himself, was taken after a desperate resistance of 47 days. Along with some others, he concealed himself in a cavern, but his hiding place was discovered. Being brought before Vespasian, he would have been sent to Nero, had he not, according to his own account, for Josephus is his own and sole biographer, prophesied that his captor would yet become emperor of Rome. Nevertheless, he was kept in sort of an easy imprisonment for about 3 years. Josephus was present in the Roman army at the siege of Jerusalem by Titus. After the fall of Jerusalem in 70 A.D., Josephus was instrumental in saving the lives of some of his relatives. After this he appears to have resided at Rome and to have devoted himself to literary studies. The exact period of his death is not ascertained. All we know is that he survived Agrippa II, who died in 97 A.D. He was thrice married and had children by his second and third wives. His works are as follows: The Jewish War in 7 books, written in both Hebrew and Greek. The Hebrew version is no longer extant. The Jewish Antiquities in 20 books contain the history of his countrymen from the earliest times down to the end of the reign of Nero. The fictitious Hebrew Josephus, which for a long time was identified with Josephus' Antiquities, dates from the 10th century A.D. A treatise on the antiquity of the Jews, Against Appian, in 2 volumes, is valuable chiefly for its extracts from old historical writers. An autobiography, 37 to 90 A.D., in 1 book, may be considered as supplementary to the Antiquities. The other works attributed to him are not believed to be genuine. The peculiar character of Josephus is not difficult to describe. He was, in the main, honest and veracious. He had a sincere liking for his countrymen and pride and enthusiasm in old national history. But the hopelessness of attempting to withstand the enormous power of the Romans, and an aversion to martyrdom, caused him to side with the enemy in the faint hope of being thus of some use to the national cause. The influence of Greek philosophy and learning is visible in all his writing. As far as biblical history is concerned, he infused into it a tone of rationalism. He speaks of Moses as a human rather than a divinely inspired lawgiver. He doubts the miracle in the crossing of the Red Sea and the swallowing of Jonah by the whale. Generally speaking, whatever is calculated to teach that there is a special miraculous providence at work on behalf of the chosen people, he also doubts. His style is easy and elegant, and Josephus has often been called the Greek Livy. The Edito Principus of the Greek text appeared at Basel, Fraben, in 1544. Since then, the most important editions with notes are those of Hudson, Oxford, 1720, Haverkamp, Amsterdam, 1726, Oberthur, Leipzig, 1782-85, Richter, Leipzig, 1825-27, and Dindorf, Paris, 1845. Josephus has been frequently translated. The 2 best-known versions in English are by Lestrange, London, 1702, and Whiston, London, 1737, the most recent of those of Thackeray and Marcus in the Loeb Library. Of his admission into the Essene order, Josephus writes in his life, "When I had reached my 16th year, did I undertake to examine into our different religious sects and their doctrines, that having come to know him, I might choose the one to me appear the best. I have already mentioned there was 3 sects of Pharisees, Sadducees, and the Essene. Having resolved this, did I at once begin to prepare myself in different ways, that I might be found worthy to be admitted into the order of the Essene. In order to accomplish this, I turned to a man called Bonus, of whom I was told that he belonged to the brotherhood of the Essene and lived in the wilderness. He made his clothes out of the bark and leaves of trees, fed upon wild fruits, plants, and herbs, and from holiness bathed several times night and day in cold water. In this man's company I spent 3 entire years, going under all kinds of trials, temptations, and privations, and then returned to the city. The doctrine of the Essene tends to teach all men that they confidently may trust their fate in the hands of God, as nothing happens without his will. They say that the soul is immortal, and they aspire to lead a righteous and honest life. They are the most honest people in the world, and always as good as their word. They are very industrious and enterprising, and show great skill and concern in agriculture. But most of all are those venerated, esteemed, and admired who lived in the wilderness. On account of the sense of justice that they ever show and the courage and intrepidity that they manifest in ever defending truth and innocence. This trait is not found in such a high degree either with the Grecians or any other people, but it has always characterized the Essene from time immemorial. They never kept servants. They do not think it right that one should be the slave or servant of another, as all men are brethren and God their Father. Therefore they serve and assist each other. For accountants for the profits of their agricultural labor and handiwork, they choose the most virtuous, honest, and pious of their brethren. Those also perform the service of priests and provide for all the wants as food and clothing. They all live in the same simple, industrious, and frugal life. In his work De Bello Judaico, chapters 2 through 13, Josephus further writes, "The third class of philosophers among the Jews, and the class that is most esteemed for their just and moral life, is that of the Essenes. Although they are certainly descended from the Jewish people, they show more amity and love for each other than other Jews and live a more moral life. They shun and despise sensuality as a great sin, but consider a moral and temperate life a great virtue. They pride highly the strength of mind and the power to overcome the passions and desire of their nature. They willingly adopt the children of other people, and especially while these are very young, as they then are most susceptible to teaching and impression. They show great kindness to such children, hold them dear, and teach them all kinds of knowledge in science, morals, and religion. They do not reject wedlock, but to the contrary consider it necessary for the propagation of mankind. They despise riches and worldly gain, and the equality of property among them must be admired. Therefore none of them are seen to live in abundance or need. The laws of the order regulate that everyone enters into the brotherhood gives up all to this his property and wealth. Therefore among them are seen neither haughtiness nor slavish subjection, but all live together as brethren, share in good and evil. They do not live in any particular town, but in a very town the order has its respective house. In this house the members take their abode when they arrive on their travels, and they are there supplied with all they want. Everything is here at their disposition, and if in their own houses. Here they are received as the best friends and near relations by persons they never before saw. In every town there is an elder who has in his care clothes and other necessary things that he graciously distributes to them who need such. The Essenes use their clothes until they are worn out and cannot be used any longer. They neither buy nor sell among themselves. Every member willingly gives his brother what he needs of his, and is again supplied by others with what is needful. Even if he thinks he can never repay it, he may without bashfulness receive it, as this is a rule with him. The Essene worship of God is grand, sacred, and majestic. Before the sun rises and greets the earth with its beams, they do not speak on earthly matters, but read and send forth their sacred, humble prayers that they have learned from their fathers. The elders point out the work in which each one is the most skilled. Having thus worked for 5 hours, do they again gather, bathe themselves in cold water, and don a white linen garb. Having washed themselves, they proceed to the special halls of the order, where no one dare come who does not belong to their order. Having gone through the ceremonies that the law prescribes, they proceed, perfectly cleansed, to their eating rooms with the same reverence as if they entered the holy temple. Everybody having taken his place in supreme silence and stillness, the bakers of the brotherhood enter, distributing a bread to each person after a certain order. The cook sets before each one a plate of vegetables and other eatables. This being performed, one of the priests steps forth and holds a prayer. They consider it a grave sin to rest or touch food before praying. The meal over, the priest reads another prayer, and then the hymn of praise is sung. In this way they praise and thank God, the giver of all good, both before and after the meal. They then take off their white aprons, which they considered sacred cloth. They return to their work, which they pursue till the twilight spreads over the earth. Then they go to their frugal evening meal again, during which they observe the same ceremonies as at their dinner. If members from foreign parts have arrived, they are put in the chief places at the table. This meal is taken with the most solemn silence and stillness. No noise or dispute disturbs the peace of the house. They talk by turns in a low tone, which will appear strange to those not used to it. They observe great temperance in their way of living. They eat and drink only what is necessary for their wants. In general, they do not act without the knowledge and consent of their elders. But it is always left to their own free will to exercise benevolence and compassion to all in want of all classes of society. To feed the hungry, clothe the naked, and shelter the homeless. To comfort the sick, visit, assist, and comfort the prisoner. To comfort, aid, and protect the widows and fatherless. They never let themselves be overcome by anger, hate, vengeance, or ill will. Indeed, they are the champions of faith, truth, and honesty. As the servants and arbitrators of peace, their yea and nay were with them as binding as the most sacred oath. Except the oath they take at their admittance into the order, they never bind themselves through an oath, neither in their public nor private life. Oath and profanity are with them as much shunned as perjury itself. They consider that the man loses his esteem among his fellow citizens, whose word is not sufficient without swearing. They study with perseverance and interest ancient writings. They especially prefer such that are intended to indurate and strengthen the body and ennoble and sanctify the spirits. They have profound knowledge of the art of healing and study it arduously. They examine and are acquired with the medicinal herbs and plants which they prepare as medicine for man and beast. They also know the use and worth of minerals as medicine, and do a great deal of good by applying these for healing the sick. Anybody that wishes to belong to the brotherhood is not at once admitted. Before admittance to the brotherhood, one has first to pass a whole year of trials outside the same. One has to live according to certain rules and regulations. During this time he has to prove himself worthy through a strictly moral and virtuous life and temperance. He is provided with a spade, an apron, and a white garb. Now he is again subjected to new trials. Having passed through these, he is sprinkled with water or baptized as a sign of his spiritual purity and liberation from material things. Having thus proved his chastity and being further tried in his strength of character and other qualities and found to be worthy, he is at last admitted an actual member of the brotherhood. But before he touches any food in the presence of the brotherhood, does he take this sacred vow, above all things to fear God. He must of a true and pure heart exercise justice and honesty to all men. Neither of impulse nor influenced by others must he harm or hurt any man. During all his life to shun injustice, ever undaunted to further truth and justice. Further, he vows sacredly ever to obey his worldly rulers, as nobody has the rule without the will of God. If he become a ruler, does he vow not to misuse power, to set an example for his subjects by a virtuous life, frugality, and plain clothing. He shall always love truth and shun falsehood, to preserve his mind from impure thought or impulse, never to stain his hands with unjust gain. He vows never to interpret or explain anything of the laws of the order in any other spirit than he himself has received it from the Holy Fathers. To faithfully hide and take care of the books and archives of the order, according to special regulations to keep secret the names of the angels with whom the Fathers formerly stood in communion. This was the vow that every member must take, and which they consider so sacred that they would rather suffer the most violent death than to break it. The members who broke this vow, or was caught in the act of any crime or vice, or could be proved to have committed the act, was expelled from the brotherhood. Generally these people grew very old, and I myself know several who have arrived at an extraordinary old age. I presume this fact may be accounted for by their temperance, laborious life, and strict regularity. Their courage and uncommon tranquility cannot be disturbed by the greatest calamities, adversities, or troubles. They can bear suffering and pain with the greatest calmness and strength of mind. In defense of anything good and just, they gladly preferred death for life. During the Roman war, they have indeed been subjected to great calamities and suffering. All conceivable forms of suffering have been invented and used to make them deny their faith and deride their lawgiver. All these efforts have been in vain. Unshaken in their determination, they have suffered these excruciations in silence and with great endurance. Many of them have in the very pain rebuked their enemies with the sharp sword of the words of truth. They have then, to the great amazement of the bystanders, in a calm mind and joyful mien, given up the spirit in the firm belief and faith that their bodies shall decay and become dust, but that their souls are immortal and shall live eternally. They say that during the worldly life the spirit is chained to the body like a prisoner in a cell, but when these chains burst by wear and decay, then the spirit is freed from the bodily prison. Already tasting the heavenly bliss, it soars up to the bright kingdom of joy and peace. They agree that the pious spirits, previous to their admission into the joy of heaven, hover in space over the waters without being affected by rain, snow, cold, or heat. They maintain that by the doctrines of the immortality of the soul, men are promoted and encouraged to a virtuous life and shun vice. Many of the Essenes have often stepped forth among the people as prophets. They inform them of things to happen. It is easier for these holy men to prophesy, as they from their earliest infancy study nature and the doctrine of God. They are instructed in goodly books and the writings of the prophets, and grow in wisdom and purity of heart. Their presages often come true, and this increased their esteem with the people as holy men and prophets. The Essenes consider that everyone who does not marry hereby contracts the propagation and destination of mankind, as men would soon cease to exist otherwise. But ere they married, they put the one that had chosen as their wife on a term of trial for 3 years. After this threefold trial and cleansing, if the woman was found to be chaste and faithful and capable of bearing children, they married her. They never had sexual intercourse with the wife in her pregnancy, thereby to show they had not married for lust, but to fulfill the command of Jehovah, "Be fruitful, increase, and fill the earth." When the women bathe or wash themselves, they are clothed in a linen garb. The men similarly, when they bathe, wear an apron or belt around the waist. In whatever they do, they exercise great order and chastity. Rightly do they deserve to be called an example for the life of other people. Philo and other first-century authors on the Essene. Pliny the Elder, in his Natural History, describes their customs, a race by themselves more remarkable than any other in this wide world. According to Josephus, their lives and principles were followed by the Pythagoreans and Stoics. He regards them as the oldest of the initiates, receiving the traditions of Central Asia through the Egyptians. He also mentions their superior capacity for predicting the future after preparing themselves by prolonged fasts, and says that their prophets were always fulfilled. All the contemporary authors mention that the first century Essene, far from being a sect of metaphysical speculators, were on the contrary men of action, who put into practice their religious, moral, social, and scientific conception. In Palestine and Syria they were called Essene. The members of the sect in Egypt, especially those living by Lake Marotus near Alexandria, were called Therapeutae in Latin, Therapeutae in Greek, in other words, healers. The three most objective sources from which we can reconstruct the life and teaching of the first century Essenes are the Alexandrian philosopher Philo, Flavius Josephus, the Roman historian, both of them contemporary, and Pliny the Elder. We possess other valuable passages through Epiphanes, Eusebius, Hippolytus, and Porphyro, to whom should also be added Strabo and Chaeremon, who both give information of value. In order to practice their daily life, which was different from that of the rest of the Jews, the Essene formed a number of groups, the largest and most important of them being on the northwest coast of the Dead Sea, near the mouth of the River Jordan. The second largest, and not less important community, was on the shore of Lake Marotus, close to Alexandria. The other smaller groups played no very important part historically. During the week, most of them lived separately, but each seventh day they gathered to talk, eat, bathe, and pray together. All the authors are agreed that they never ate meat and took no other drink than rainwater or the juice of fruits. They also say that they lived chiefly on the fruits of trees and bushes and on the vegetables and seeds of the field. Most of the other authors mention that the first century Essenes were very fond of music and were always happy, so we can see that they were very far removed from the austerity of the later Christian monasteries. In particular, these authors praise the melodic beauty of their music, the technical capacities of their musicians, and the plasticity of their exercise and dances. They further add that they were very friendly and generous to visitors, whom they received only on the Sabbath. The first century Essenes were without exception opposed to life in the big city. They always lived in the country and always by lakes and rivers. They had a great influence on their neighbors through their daily life and example. They were against luxury and sensual pleasures, living a very simple and natural life. Each of them had a single white garment. Each ate a single dish at his meal, and all worked till sundown. They attached great importance to their communal meals, which were always at sunset and were partaken of in silence, preceded by a special prayer. Their chief collective occupation was agriculture and arboriculture. This occupation was followed by all without exception during half the day. In addition to this activity, they formed three groups, choosing freely an intellectual occupation from medicine, astronomy, or education. Their contemporaries regarded them as the heirs to Chaldean and Egyptian astronomy, and to the medicine of the ancient Persians. Their system of education was likewise greatly esteemed by their contemporaries, and is described as peripaetic, walks being taken in common by master and pupils on the shores of the lake or in their gardens. They had a holiday each seventh day and an atmosphere of joy and contentment. They always preserved in their simple ways and diet, and neither force nor temptation ever succeeded in turning them from their characteristic life and principle. They had 4 degrees in their society, based on individual merit, on erudition, and on age. The heads of their communities observed an extraordinarily strict purity and simplicity in what they ate. These leaders guided their communities less by regulation and law than by their personal example and individual superiority. All the authors agreed that they had secret traditions, practices, and teaching, which were transmissible only by initiates. They always stressed, too, to understand their teachings, it was necessary to live the true life for many years, and to change oneself physically, intellectually, and morally. For this reason, they had a 3-year novitiate before finally accepting anyone among them. The results show that this was an excellent system, as no case of expulsion or disobedience was ever noted in their history. After 7 years of inner life, they began to initiate candidates into their traditional secrets, and during the subsequent year they continued to reveal their teaching until these initiates had attained the highest degree of comprehension. Generally, they all lived to an extremely advanced age. It was very rare for them to die before their 100th or 120th year, and most of them lived still longer. Josephus tells us the oath which they asked of every candidate after the 3 years had expired before being admitted into the communal meal. Before the candidate is allowed to touch the common food, he is obliged to take an oath. He will exercise piety towards the deity and justice towards men. He will do no harm to anyone, either of his own accord or by the command of others. He will always shun the unjust and cleave to the just. He will always show good example to all men. He will show himself loyal to his master, since their power comes from God and his angels. He will never force his personal opinion or authority on others. He will at no time wear special or luxurious garments. He will love the truth and avoid all that is false. He will keep his hands clean from all material impurities and his soul free from all unclean thoughts. He will never have secrets from his brethren, and he will never denounce them, even at the cost of his life. Moreover, he swears that he will transmit the traditions he has received. He will preserve the sacred scriptures, books, and traditions with the greatest care. He will scrupulously keep the names and commands of the angels, which he has learned to know. Philo, from Quod Omnis Probus Liber, compares the Essenes with the Persian Magi and the Indian yogis. They lived a communal life, and each of them performed certain agricultural and manual labors. Land, houses, tools, and books were held in common. The result of their common labor were distributed proportionally among them. They distributed all their surplus possessions among the poor. They healed without reward all the sick who came to them. Beside the poor and sick, they also helped the old and orphans. They refrained from expressing political opinions. They always condemned slavery in no uncertain terms. They lived on terms of perfect equality between men and women, contrary to the customs and social structure of their period. The elders who educated the young always enjoyed the greatest respect, but this was not a system of hierarchy. For administrative purposes, they elected certain chiefs. Above and before all, they had their traditional secrets based on angelology, the fundamental science of all their teaching. Epiphanes mentions in the Panarion the Hemobaptist, a group of Essenes whose principal rites were bath, ablutions, and daily exercise. Hegepipsis and Justin the Martyrs also speak of them in similar terms. We know from other authors that the morning bath were not only practiced by the group described by Epiphanes, but also by the Essenes of every community without exception. The morning baths were followed by special breathing and gymnastic exercises. The Hemorrhabaptists were par excellence the medical group of the Essenes, who dedicated themselves entirely to healing and to baptism. They had been both celibate and married folk among them. Before entering into marriage, men and women alike followed certain practices of purification, and for a whole year ate special meals prescribed by the elders. There were yet other prescriptions for women during the period of pregnancy. They had a special book called Tradition of the Fathers on the Immaculate Conception, which they followed very strictly. The children, when their first year of life was completed, were educated by the older pedagogue, but were fed by their mothers. The studies, exercise, and regime of the children were specially supervised by the elders. But the most peculiar thing in the eyes of the lay authors was the great solemnity of their communal meal every Sabbath, that is, on the eve of Saturday. On this occasion they were all clothed in white. They began their meal with prayer, ritual, and solemn meditation. After eating their frugal meal in absolute silence, they had music. They discussed their activities of the past week and prepared their program for the coming week. After playing with the children, the evening ended with a walk all together by the shore of the lake or along the river's bank. According to their contemporaries, they regarded the evening as the beginning of the day. In the evening, they devoted themselves to their studies and spiritual concentration. They divided the day into 14 parts and arranged their work and activities in accordance with these periods. They divided the year into 13 equal parts. The elders, following the ancient traditions, prescribed special regimes and exercises which differed with each month. It was not without reason that the writers contemporary with the Essenes regarded them as a race apart. They were indeed different from other people both in their principles and in their daily life and practice. There are very few points on which the authors disagree. From their almost unanimous accounts, it is possible to make a virtually complete reconstruction of their life and moral conceptions. The chief point in all the writers, without exception, are agreed is that the first century Essenes enjoyed a high moral reputation among the various Jewish sects and among all their neighboring people. That they were held in high regard is incontestable. We find no unfavorable judgment or opinion recorded against the Essenes among authors of antiquity. They were the only sect to be without enemies and to escape criticism at the hands of even the most ironical writers. The first century Essenes gave humanity the greatest figures of antiquity, the latter prophets, John the Baptist, Jesus, and John the beloved disciple. The Essene Renaissance. The first century Essenes had no formal creed. Their members were convinced that freedom is the indispensable condition of wholesome spiritual life for humankind. They insisted upon being just as free to make new discoveries in religion as a scientist is in biology or chemistry. Precious as is freedom, they did not regard it as an end in itself, but rather as a condition in which alone they could fulfill their function, which was to enrich the individual life and to improve the social order. The only religion that could satisfy them was one that rose above the ancient divisions and united people all over the world in one brotherhood. The fundamental belief of the modern Essenes is that the renaissance of the original purity, simplicity, and harmony of the free creative life of the first century Essene is the only way out of the present world chaos of violence, ignorance, misery, and suffering. On this universal and eternal basis, they are trying to bring about the all-sided realization of the best forms of individual and social life. They always and everywhere get rid of what is bad by strengthening what is good, never by violent attack on what is bad. They get rid of ignorance simply by extending education and not by violent attacks on ignorance. They get rid of egoism simply by aiding and extending altruism and not by violent attack on egoism. They get rid of violence simply by the progressive growth and strength of our constructive social activity and not by destructive attack on violence. They get rid of misery by the progressive elimination of the chief individual and social cause of misery, by giving progressively unlimited possibilities to everyone of winning and extending individual and collective well-being, and not by violent attack on the existing laws of society. They get rid of disease simply by strengthening the vitality of the organism and not by attacking the disease. They get rid of chaos and darkness by the extensive organization of order and the progressive organization of light, and not by destructive or violence. In brief, they create a better future by the constructive and progressive amelioration of the present and not by the destruction of the past. They bring about a peaceful inner revolution, an individual rebirth in each altruistic, intelligent, and active being in order to ensure the unlimited progressive evolution of mankind towards an ever better future. Excerpts from the Dead Sea Scroll, reprinted from Teaching of the Essene, From Enoch to the Dead Sea Scroll, by Edmond Bordeaux Szekely. Verse: The law was planted to reward the children of light with healing and abundant peace, with long life, with fruitful seed of everlasting blessing, with eternal joy, in immortality of eternal light. From the Manual of Discipline from the Dead Sea Scroll. He assigned to man 2 spirits with which he should walk. They are the spirits of truth and of falsehood. Truth born out of the spring of light, falsehood from the well of darkness. The dominion of all the children of truth is in the hands of the angel of light, so that they will walk in the ways of light. The spirits of truth and falsehood struggle within the heart of man, behaving with wisdom and folly, and according as a man inherits truth, so will he avoid darkness. Blessings on all that have cast their lot with the law, that walk truthfully in all their ways. May the law bless them with all good, and keep them from all evil, and illumine their hearts with insight into the things of life, and grace them with knowledge of things eternal. From the Manual of Discipline from the Dead Sea Scrolls. The law was planted in the garden of the brotherhood, to enlighten the heart of man, and to make straight before him all the ways of true righteousness, a humble spirit or even temper, a freely compassionate nature, and eternal goodness and understanding and insight, and mighty wisdom which believes in all God's work, and a confident trust in his many blessings, and a spirit of knowledge in all things of the great order. Loyal feelings towards all the children of light, a radiant purity which loathes everything impure, a discretion regarding all the hidden things of truth and secrets of the inner knowledge. From the Manual of Discipline of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Thou hast made known unto me thy deep mysterious things. All things exist by thee, and there is none beside thee. By thy law thou hast directed my heart, and I set my steps straight toward upon right path, and walk where their presence is. From the Book of Hymns 7, the Dead Sea Scrolls. I will praise thy works with songs of thanksgiving continually, from period to period, in the circuits of the day, and in its fixed order, with the coming of light from its source, and at the turn of evening and the outgoing of light, at the outgoing of darkness and the coming in of day, continually, in all the generation of time. From the Thanksgiving Psalms, the Dead Sea Scrolls. I thank thee, Heavenly Father, because thou hast put me at the source of running streams, at the living spring in a land of drought, watering an eternal garden of wonders, the tree of life, mystery of mysteries, growing everlasting branches for eternal planting, to sink their roots into the stream of life from an eternal source. And thou, Heavenly Father, protect thy fruits with the angel of the day, and of the night, and with flames of eternal light burning every way. From the Thanksgiving Psalms of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I am grateful, Heavenly Father, for thou hast raised me to an eternal height, and I walk in the wonders of the plain. Thou gavest me guidance to reach thine eternal company from the depths of the earth. Thou hast purified my body to join the army of the angels of the earth, and my spirit to reach the congregation of the heavenly angels. Thou gavest man eternity to praise at dawn and dusk thy works and wonders in joyful song. From the Thanksgiving Psalms of the Dead Sea Scrolls. May he bless thee with every good. May he keep thee from all evil, and illumine thy heart with the knowledge of life, and favor thee with eternal wisdom. And may he give his sevenfold blessing upon thee to everlasting peace. From the Manual of Discipline of the Dead Sea Scrolls. With the coming of day I embrace my mother. With the coming of night I join my father. And with the outgoing of evening and morning I will breathe the law. And I will not interrupt these communions until the end of time. From the Manual of Discipline of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I have reached the inner vision, and through the Spirit in me I have heard thy wondrous secret. Through thy mystic insight, thou hast cast a spring of knowledge to well up within me, a fountain of power, pouring forth living waters, a flood of love and all-embracing wisdom, like the splendor of eternal light. From the Dead Sea Scrolls. End of chapter, end of book. This audio presentation of the Essenes by Josephus and his Contemporaries by Edmond, Bordeaux, Szekely has been brought to you by audioenlightenment.com, copyright 2014, all rights reserved.